Early on the morning of our 10th wedding anniversary, a giant bouquet of 99 red roses from my husband arrived at our company's front desk. My coworkers gathered around, squealing with envy, gushing about how we were still as madly in love as newlyweds even after a decade of marriage. But as I was getting a vase to arrange the flowers, I overheard the cleaning ladies gossiping in the breakroom. Elena is so clueless. Ethan literally brought his side piece into the company 3 years ago, and she still has no idea. Exactly. Every anniversary he gets his wife a generic bouquet of roses, but he buys his little mistress designer bags, sports cars and luxury apartments. It's pretty obvious who he actually loves, right? My heart violently seized. A year ago, Ethan said he wanted to buy a luxury condo downtown, claiming it would be convenient for hosting high-end clients. I bought it. Last month, he wanted to upgrade his car to a Porsche, saying it would make him look more professional when meeting investors. I put down the deposit. And just last week, he asked me to use my VIP account at Hermes to buy a bunch of lifestyle accessories, claiming he needed to gift a VIP client a rare handbag. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my hand. Hi, is this Mrs. Elena Vance? The limited edition Hermes Birkin you ordered has arrived at our boutique. I took a deep breath, turned on my heel, and headed straight to the luxury store. Since these things were never meant for clients in the first place, it was time for me to take them all back. Hey babe, did that Hermes bag you helped me order finally arrive? I had just walked into the private VIP lounge and picked up the limited edition orange Birkin, which required over $100,000 in pre-spending, when Ethan's call came through. I looked up and caught the sales associate's smile freezing on her face. So my husband had his own eyes and ears inside this store. Yeah, I just got it, I replied, my voice sounding flat even to my own ears. Ethan's voice was instantly pumped with excitement. Awesome. I'll swing by and grab it after work. I actually have a dinner meeting with a major client tonight to lock down that new project. I slowly ran my fingers over the supple, pebbled leather of the bag. It was the classic Hermes orange. Bright, flashy, and attention-grabbing. I had always hated loud colors like this. Most of Ethan's high-profile business clients were around my age. None of them would realistically carry a bag in this shade. That was why, when I placed the order last week, I had specifically requested a classy, understated A-tip gray. Which client are you gifting this to? I can just have my assistant deliver it directly to their office, I said casually. Silence stretched over the line for 2 agonizing seconds. Babe, come on, it's our anniversary today. Why would I want to stress you out with work errands? Ethan chuckled nervously. Plus, you haven't been involved in this specific project. You wouldn't be able to chat with them about the details if they asked. He was dodging the question, talking in circles. Since last year, Ethan had practically moved into the gym. He was constantly flexing his new abs in the mirror and spending 30 minutes styling his hair every single morning before leaving for work. My best friend had joked once, asterisk, is your husband going through a midlife crisis, or is he having an affair? Asterisk. I had laughed it off back then. Ethan and I had been together for 10 years, surviving the transition from college sweethearts to business partners. I was the one who stood by him when he had absolutely nothing. I was the one who ignored my wealthy family's warnings and used my own inheritance and connections to fund his startup. I watched him grow from a clueless boy into a polished CEO. We survived the worst of times together. Why couldn't we share the best of times? My eyes burned with unshed tears. Fine. Come pick it up now then, I said, hanging up before he could respond. I closed my eyes. Memories of us huddling together in our cramped, freezing studio apartment years ago flashed across my mind. But they were instantly shattered by the image of him today, meticulously styling his hair in front of the vanity. As it turned out, the pain of a breaking heart was far worse than physical labor. My hands trembled as I unlocked my phone and texted the real estate broker who had helped us buy the downtown condo last year. I need you to sell the downtown condo immediately. List it for $1 million cash today. The broker replied almost instantly. Elena, are you serious? That is way below market value. You paid nearly double that amount last year. My heart felt completely numb. Just sell it. Today. Right after I locked my phone, Ethan rushed into the VIP lounge. Babe, what made you decide to come pick up the bag yourself today? I glanced at my watch. It had taken him less than 20 minutes to get here. Was he really that terrified of me uncovering his little secret? The store manager called me and said my VIP order was ready, so I happened to be in the area, I said smoothly. Ethan shot a sharp, warning glare at the sales associate, Sarah. But when he turned back to me, his face softened into his usual warm, loving expression. I smiled faintly, pretending not to notice their little exchange. By the way, Ethan, I distinctly remember ordering the A-tip gray last week. Why did Sarah hand me an orange one? Ethan's face went stiff and he fell silent. I tapped my fingers on the luxury bag and turned my gaze to Sarah. This isn't the bag I ordered. You've completely wasted my time and my husband's. I paused, my voice cold. Should I file a formal complaint with corporate? Sarah panicked, shooting a desperate, pleading look at Ethan. But Ethan remained quiet, sweat practically beads on his forehead. No ma'am, it wasn't my mistake. Your husband was the one who, Sarah started to stammer. Ethan quickly cut her off. Babe, the bag is actually for the client's daughter, he lied smoothly, flashing a reassuring smile. I was worried a young girl wouldn't like the boring gray you chose, so I called Sarah back and had her switch it to the orange one. A young girl? I caught my reflection in the polished glass storefront. I still looked virtually the same as I did 10 years ago, stylish, sharp, and well-kept. But in his eyes, I was already the old wife. Sensing the tension, Sarah quickly pulled a silk scarf from the display cabinet and placed it gently near my hand. I am so sorry, Mrs. Vance. This was miscommunication on our part for not notifying you beforehand. Please accept our sincerest apologies. Ethan reached over, rubbing his hand through my hair, and slid close to me on the plush velvet sofa. To avoid office gossip, he had always refused to show any form of physical affection toward me at the office. I felt a wave of discomfort and subtly shifted away from his touch. He frowned slightly, then gave Sarah a quick wink. Sarah, go grab some of your latest arrivals. Let my wife pick out whatever she wants. Watching him play the doting, guilty husband made me feel physically sick. I rarely visited this boutique myself. Usually, whenever he claimed a client needed a gift, I would just call and put it on my card. But seeing how comfortable and familiar he was with Sarah, it was obvious he had been spending a lot of time, and my money, in this store. Babe, I know you're upset about the color mix-up, Ethan cooed, trying to wrap his arm around my waist. Tell you what, whatever you want in the store today, it's on me. Happy anniversary. Sarah brought out a dozen gorgeous bags, laying them out in front of me. Every color, every style. But I felt absolutely nothing. I waved my hand dismissively. Forget it. I have a meeting with some partners this afternoon anyway. I looked at him. Didn't you say you had to deliver that gift to your client? You should get going. Right on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He quickly planted a soft kiss on my forehead. Don't be mad at me, okay? I promise to make it up to you tonight. I watched him stand up, check his phone, and practically skip out of the boutique. His steps were so light, so full of anticipation. I let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. You really can't hide the energy of someone who is freshly in love. I had been so blind for so long, busy running the actual business while he was out playing boyfriend. The moment he disappeared from view, I stood up and walked over to Sarah. I want to see the full transaction history under his authorized user card. Sarah looked me up and down, a hint of hesitation in her eyes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance, but that is private client information. We aren't authorized to share transaction details without the primary user's consent. There was a subtle, condescending smirk on her face, as if she assumed I was just a wealthy trophy wife throwing a tantrum. Even if you complain to corporate, our policy stands, she added. I reached into my Chanel wallet, pulled out my Centurion Black card, and slammed it onto the glass counter. Sarah's eyes went wide, and her smug attitude instantly evaporated. The card he uses? It's just an authorized user card linked directly to my primary account, I said, my voice deadpan. Now, do I have the right to see where my money is going? Sarah bowed her head quickly, taking the card with trembling hands. Of course, ma'am. I will pull up the records immediately. A second later, the computer screen populated with page after page of transaction history. In the past month alone, there was over $80,000 of spending on high-end jewelry, women's shoes, and ready-to-wear pieces. I scanned the customer profile linked to those purchases. The phone number listed wasn't Ethan's. I memorized the number instantly. Print the entire history out for me. Now. Holding the thick stack of printed receipts, I walked out of the store into the crisp afternoon air. I pulled out my phone and texted my personal assistant, Amy. Find out who owns this phone number immediately. Also, run a forensic audit on Ethan's personal bank accounts and our corporate expense reports for the last 3 years. Less than 2 minutes later, Amy replied. Elena, I found it. The phone number is registered to Chloe Miller, our front desk receptionist. When I walked back into our corporate headquarters, I immediately spotted a group of girls crowded around the reception desk. That bright, limited edition orange Hermes Birkin was being passed around like a trophy. Oh my God, Chloe. This bag is absolutely stunning. Isn't this like virtually impossible to get? One of the girls squealed in awe. I walked over, casually reached into the circle, and snatched the bag right out of their hands. I examined it for a few seconds. Yep. It was the exact bag I had just authorized at the boutique. It is incredibly hard to get, I said, looking up with a cold smile. I've been on the wait list for a month and couldn't even get my hands on one. Chloe's face instantly twisted in annoyance. She snatched the bag back from my hands, clutching it to her chest. Well, my boyfriend bought it for me. Doesn't Elena's husband buy her things like this? Chloe smirked, her voice dripping with malice. Oh wait. I guess when a man has to go home to a wrinkly, exhausted wife every day, he probably doesn't feel like buying her luxury gifts anyway. The other girls exchanged knowing, amused glances, clearly enjoying the drama. Yeah, did Elena only get a cheap bouquet of roses for her anniversary today? One whispered. My boyfriend says roses are so basic. They're just for show. If a man really loves you, he buys you the best, Chloe bragged, tossing her curled hair. I looked at the smug, mocking faces of the girls around her. It clicked. The entire office knew Ethan was sleeping with the receptionist. I was the only fool kept in the dark, working myself to the bone to fund their lifestyle. The pain in my chest was so suffocating I could barely breathe. Since we got married, Ethan had stopped buying me real gifts. He always used the same excuse. Asterisk, babe, we've been together forever. My money is your money. There's no point in wasting cash on flashy gifts. Asterisk. Yet every single anniversary, he'd order a generic bouquet of roses. He used to tell me roses represented eternal devotion. But the truth was I hated roses. I had sent him countless hints on Pinterest of the wildflowers and orchids I actually liked. But the next year, it would be the same lazy roses. I had always excused it, thinking he was just a typical, clueless guy who didn't understand aesthetics. But he wasn't clueless at all. He knew exactly how to pick out the perfect, vibrant orange bag for his 20-something mistress. He knew how to buy her a BMW and rent her a luxury condo. He didn't lack effort. He just didn't want to waste it on me. Seeing that I remained silent, Chloe grew even bolder, puffing her chest out. Oh dear, is Elena going to cry? She mocked. It's just a bag. If you want one so bad, I have plenty of older designer bags in my closet. I can toss you one of my hand-me-downs if you ask nicely. Over the past 2 years, Chloe had been showing up to work every day draped in different designer brands. I had actually wondered once how a receptionist making $15 an hour could afford a wardrobe like that. I had naively assumed she was just a spoiled trust fund kid working an easy job for fun. Who would have thought that her lavish lifestyle was entirely funded by my sweat and tears? Half the bags she owned were ordered through my own VIP accounts. A cold rage surged through my veins, but my face became terrifyingly calm. No thank you, I said, my voice ice cold. Keep your trash to yourself. Chloe rolled her eyes and gasped dramatically, covering her mouth. Are you jealous, Elena? But honestly, you're pushing 40. This bright orange really doesn't suit an older, washed-up woman like you anyway. I let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You're right. This color doesn't suit me. It suits a pathetic, home-wrecking gold digger perfectly. Chloe's face flushed red with anger, her eyes instantly welling with fake tears. What did you just call me? Elena, just because your husband doesn't love you anymore doesn't give you the right to abuse your employees. The other girls quickly chimed in to defend her. Yeah, Elena, just because you have marriage problems doesn't mean you can bully Chloe. No wonder Ethan always looks so exhausted and miserable around the office. Having a toxic boss for a wife must be a nightmare. They were already treating Chloe like she was the next CEO's wife. I stared at Chloe with absolute detestation. You know exactly what you are. I didn't waste another second arguing with them. I turned around and walked straight back to my office. Ugh, whatever. She only got her position because of Ethan anyway. Without him, she's absolutely nothing. I know, right? Don't let her get to you, Chloe. You're young, beautiful, and actually capable. Soon enough you'll. Their loud, petty whispers echoed down the hallway. I got my position because of Ethan? A dark, mocking smile spread across my face. I pulled out my phone and messaged my assistant. Amy, cancel the Friday happy hour early dismissal for everyone involved in that conversation at the front desk. I walked past the glass partitions of the executive floor and pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of my private office suite. Unlike Ethan's lavish, brass-accented corner office down the hall, which was decorated with expensive modern art he didn't understand, my workspace was sparse, functional, and lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's financial district. Amy was already waiting inside, holding a thick black leather binder and 2 steaming mugs of black coffee. The prelim results from the forensic audit just cleared, Amy said, setting the binder down on my desk without preamble. Her voice was steady, crisp, and devoid of pity. It's far worse than we anticipated, Elena. I sat in my leather armchair, smoothed down my blazer, and opened the binder. Show me. Ethan hasn't just been using your primary credit card for personal luxury spending, Amy explained, pointing a polished nail at a series of wire transfer logs. Over the last 24 months, he's created 3 separate LLCs under Chloe's mother's maiden name. He's been funneling corporate consultancy fees, roughly $1.8 million in total, directly from our subsidiary accounts into those shell companies. I looked at the numbers. $1,840,000. That was the exact capital buffer we had set aside for our R&D division's new medical supply line, the project I had spent 90-hour weeks developing while Ethan was posing for magazine covers as the young CEO of the year. What about the Porsche? I asked softly. The deposit came from your personal account, but the title registration was submitted under Chloe Miller's name 2 days ago. It's currently parked in the basement VIP bay. Amy hesitated slightly, then pulled out a secondary file. And the downtown luxury condo you listed today? He didn't just use it to host clients. Chloe's entire family has been living there rent-free, charging their weekly maid services and private chef caterings back to the company's hospitality ledger. I stared out the window at the skyline. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, sharp shadows across the concrete towers. 10 years ago, when Ethan and I stood in a drafty justice of the peace office to sign our marriage certificate, he had squeezed my hands until his knuckles turned white. Elena, he had whispered into my neck that night. I swear to God, every penny I make for the rest of my life belongs to you. If I ever betray you, I deserve to walk away with nothing but the clothes on my back. He had forgotten that promise. But I hadn't. And more importantly, he had forgotten who actually drafted our prenuptial agreement. Amy, I said, closing the binder with a soft, final thud. Call our primary wealth management director at JP Morgan. Remove Ethan Vance as an authorized user from every single one of my personal credit lines, high-yield accounts, and family trust allocations effective immediately. Consider it done, Amy replied, tapping her tablet. And the corporate board? Send a private summons to the executive board members for an emergency closed-door meeting tomorrow morning at 8. I said, my voice dropping into an icy register. Do not notify Ethan. Do not notify his secretary. Mark it under internal equity reallocation. Amy smiled, a sharp, razor-thin smile. And Chloe Miller? Leave her alone for now, I murmured, picking up my pen. Let her enjoy her orange bag for another few hours. At 7:30 p.m., Ethan arrived home at our suburban estate in the hills. He walked into the grand foyer smelling faintly of expensive cologne and roasted coffee, carrying a fresh coat over his arm. His face was flushed with the high of a man who believed he was orchestrating the deal of the century. I was sitting in the dimly lit living room, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching the fireplace crackle. Babe, Ethan called out cheerfully, tossing his keys onto the marble console table. Sorry I'm a little late. The client dinner ran longer than expected. That guy from Apex Capital really loved the gift, said the orange Birkin was the most thoughtful gesture he'd seen all year. He walked over, bending down to kiss my cheek. I turned my head slightly, letting his lips brush the cold air near my ear. Ethan paused, frowning slightly, but quickly masked it with a bright, charming smile. He pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket and slid it onto the glass coffee table in front of me. Happy 10th anniversary, my love, he said smoothly, sitting beside me on the sofa. Open it. I looked down at the box. Inside sat a delicate diamond tennis bracelet. It was pretty expensive looking and completely generic. Thank you, I said flatly, not touching the box. Ethan's brow furrowed. What's wrong, Elena? You've been cold all day. Is this still about the color of the bag? I told you it was for the clients. Before he could finish his sentence, his phone chimed. Then it chimed again. And again. A rapid-fire barrage of text messages lit up his screen. I took a slow sip of my water, watching his face. Ethan picked up his phone casually, but as his eyes scanned the notifications, the color drained from his face with terrifying speed. Alert! Your authorized user access on JP Morgan Reserve card number 4091 has been revoked by primary account holder. Alert! Your authorized user access on Amex Centurion card number 1002 has been revoked by primary account holder. Notification. Auto debit for Porsche Financial Services lease number 8820 failed. Reason account frozen/unauthorized. What is this? Ethan stammered, his fingers trembling as he frantically tapped his phone screen. Elena? Is there a glitch with the banks? My black card just got declined. Right on cue, his phone began to ring. The caller ID displayed Chloe. He instantly panicked, slamming the phone face down against his thigh. Aren't you going to pick that up? I asked softly, my voice as calm as a quiet pond. Might be important. It's just the office front desk, Ethan lied, sweat suddenly glistening along his hairline. Probably some administrative issue for tomorrow morning. I'll handle it later. The phone rang again. And again. Finally, unable to contain his anxiety, Ethan stood up. Excuse me for a second. Babe, I need to take this in the kitchen. He rushed into the adjacent room, shutting the glass doors behind him. I didn't need to follow him. I simply picked up my iPad and opened the security camera feed for the downtown condo, the one I had listed for sale earlier that afternoon. Through the high-definition video feed, I watched as two uniformed court bailiffs and a team of commercial movers stood outside the condo's front door. They were efficiently packing racks of designer clothes, shoe boxes, and vanity sets into heavy cardboard crates while Chloe Miller stood in her silk bathrobe, screaming, crying, and flailing her arms in pure, helpless terror. Through the glass kitchen doors, I heard Ethan's voice rise into an octave of sheer, uncontrolled panic. What do you mean the locksmith changed the deadbolts? Who authorized a sheriff's eviction notice? What do you mean the property was sold 3 hours ago for cash? I smiled, set my glass down, and leaned back against the cushions. The first domino had officially fallen. By 7:45 a.m. the following morning, the atmosphere inside the corporate auditorium on the 45th floor of Vance Global headquarters was thick with suffocating tension. All 12 members of the executive board were present. These were men and women in their 50s and 60s, hardened venture capitalists, legal titans, and industry veterans. They sat around the horseshoe-shaped oak table, reviewing the thick, red-stamped dossiers Amy had distributed to their places 30 minutes prior. Ethan hadn't slept a wink. He burst into the auditorium at 7:55 a.m., his suit slightly rumpled, dark circles carved under his eyes, his breathing heavy. He had spent the entire night at a mid-tier hotel trying to calm down a hysterical Chloe, whose luxury wardrobe was currently sitting in a municipal storage facility. What is the meaning of this emergency meeting? Ethan demanded, marching down the center aisle, trying to assert his authority as CEO. Why wasn't I briefed? On the agenda? Who authorized a board assembly without my explicit consent? Old man Harrison, the oldest board member and my late father's former business partner, looked up over his half-moon reading glasses. His face was stone. Sit down, Ethan, Harrison commanded softly. I will not sit down, Ethan barked, slamming his palm onto the table. I am the chief executive officer of this company. I hold executive operational control. You hold a 12% equity stake, Ethan, I said smoothly from the far end of the room. The heavy double doors behind the stage opened, and I walked out. I was wearing a tailored ivory suit, my hair swept back, wearing no jewelry, except for a simple, elegant platinum watch. Behind me walked 3 senior partners from the city's top corporate law firm, and 2 uniformed officers from the State Financial Crimes Unit. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in shock as he looked at me. What are you doing up there? Taking my seat, I replied. I walked to the head of the table, the grand leather chair that had remained empty since my father's death 3 years ago, and pulled it out. I didn't sit immediately. I stood behind it, resting my hands on the polished wood. For 3 years, I spoke, my voice echoing clearly through the high-ceilinged room. I allowed my husband Ethan Vance to serve as the public face and CEO of Vance Global. I stepped back into an advisory role to handle our background R&D and private equity acquisitions. I turned my gaze toward the board. I did this because I believed in partnership. I believed that giving him the spotlight would allow our company to project stability and youth to international investors. I reached down, pressed a button on the podium, and the massive LED screen behind me lit up. High-resolution documents populated the display. 1. Forensic audit report. $1,840,000 in embezzled corporate funds transferred to shell companies owned by Chloe Miller. 2. Vehicle title fraud. Corporate credit lines leveraged to purchase a luxury sports car registered to a junior receptionist. 3. Intellectual property transfer. Secret negotiations initiated by Ethan to sell our proprietary medical supply patents to an offshore competitor in exchange for a private finder's fee. The entire boardroom erupted into furious, shocked gasps. Old man Harrison's face turned thunderous. He slammed his fist onto the table. Ethan, is this true? Ethan's face went from pale to a sickly, translucent green. He stumbled backward, his knees hitting an empty chair. No, it's a lie. It's a misunderstanding. Elena is manipulating the books. She's jealous because... Jealous? I interrupted, letting out a soft, cold chuckle that silenced the room. I tapped the podium again. A new document appeared on the screen. It was our original corporate charter, stamped by the Secretary of State 10 years ago. Let me remind the board, and my husband, of the foundational equity structure of Vance Global. I stated clearly, 65% of voting shares belong exclusively to the Vance Family Trust, managed solely by me, Elena Vance. I looked directly into Ethan's bloodshot eyes. Ethan's 12% stake was granted under an executive performance vesting clause. Clause 14, Section B clearly dictates that in the event of gross corporate embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, or moral turpitude, all unvested and vested equity is subject to immediate, non-compensated clawback by the chairman. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His chest heaved as if he were suffocating. Elena, no. You can't do this. We're married. We're business partners. Not anymore, I said smoothly. I picked up a gold pen from the desk and sign the master executive decree. Resting before me, as majority shareholder and chairman of the board, I hereby formally terminate Ethan Vance from his position as Chief Executive Officer of Vance Global, effective immediately. His corporate access is revoked. His equity is repossessed. I set the pen down and looked at the two police officers standing by the stage. Officers, Mr. Vance is all yours. The arrest of the CEO inside the executive boardroom sent shockwaves through the entire building within 15 minutes. As the officers led a handcuffed, weeping Ethan down the central glass elevators, I walked down to the main lobby floor, flanked by Amy and two corporate security heads. The front desk reception area was in utter, chaotic shambles. Chloe Miller was sitting behind the desk, her eyes red and swollen, wearing an oversized hoodie over her clothes because all her designer outfits had been impounded at the condo. She was frantically calling Ethan's dead mobile line, sobbing loudly while three junior receptionists tried awkwardly to comfort her. When the elevator doors slid open, and I stepped out onto the marble floor, the noise in the lobby died instantly. Dozens of employees from the surrounding departments stopped in their tracks, staring in awe. They had all seen the news notifications popping up on their corporate internal portals. Notice, executive restructuring. Ethan Vance terminated for cause. Elena Vance assumes direct chief executive authority. Chloe snapped her head up, spotting me. Driven by a sudden, desperate surge of hysterical rage, she scrambled out from behind the reception counter, her nails digging into her palms, charging straight toward me. You, Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing off the high marble ceilings. You ruined everything. You evil old bitch. You locked me out of my house. You took my car. Before she could get within 5 feet of me, my two security officers stepped forward, catching her by her arms and slamming her face first against the nearest marble pillar. Get your hands off me, Chloe screamed, kicking her feet, her voice cracking into a ragged sob. Ethan is the CEO. He's going to fire all of you. He loves me. He's divorcing her today. I walked over slowly, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. I stopped 2 paces away from her, looking down at her messy, tear-streaked face. Ethan isn't divorcing anyone, Chloe, I said softly, my voice completely smooth, mainly because he's currently sitting in the back of a police cruiser, on his way to the central booking facility for corporate grand larceny. Chloe went entirely rigid. Her eyes widened in absolute, sheer terror. What? What did you say? And as for your house, your car, and your orange Hermes bag? I leaned down, slightly, looking into her bloodshot eyes. They were purchased with embezzled funds stolen from my company. The district attorney's asset forfeiture unit has already issued a freeze on everything registered to your name. I turned my head toward the 3 junior receptionists who had defended Chloe yesterday afternoon. They were cowering behind the desk, their faces ghost white, shaking violently. Amy, I said without looking back. Yes, Elena? Issue immediate termination notices for those 3. I gestured casually toward the desk. Blacklist them from all subsidiary recruitment databases for gross professional misconduct and aiding in corporate expense fraud. No. Please, Mrs. Vance. One of the girls burst into tears, dropping to her knees behind the counter. We didn't know. Chloe told us she was going to be the new CEO's wife. She forced us to help her. You had a choice to do your job, I replied coldly, turning my back on them. You chose to place your bets on a thief, live with the payout. I looked at the head of security. Escort Miss Miller off the premises. If she sets foot within 50 yards of this building again, have her arrested for criminal trespass. No, Elena, please, Chloe shrieked as the guards dragged her backward across the polished floor toward the glass revolving doors, her sneakers squeaking pathetically against the marble. I was just following Ethan. He tricked me, Elena. The heavy glass doors swung shut, cutting off her voice entirely. I straightened my blazer, looked out over the floor at the hundreds of silent, terrified employees and raised my chin. Back to work, everyone, I announced smoothly. We have a quarterly earnings report to prepare. 2 days later, the high-security visitor room at the County Correctional Center was cold, sterile, and smelled of industrial bleach. I sat behind the thick pane of bulletproof glass, wearing a dark navy wool coat, holding a cup of hot chamomile tea I'd brought from outside. On the other side of the glass, a heavy metal door clicked open. Ethan was let in by 2 guards. He was wearing an orange institutional jumpsuit. His hands were handcuffed to a waist chain. His hair was messy, unwashed, his face covered in dark stubble, his eyes bloodshot and sunken into dark sockets. In just 48 hours, he looked like he had aged 15 years. He sat down heavily on the stool, picking up the plastic telephone receiver with shaking hands. I picked up mine and held it to my ear. Elena. Ethan's voice came through the speaker, hoarse, raspy, and trembling. with a pathetic, desperate vulnerability. Elena, please, you have to post my bail. The legal team said the judge set bail at $3 million cash. I can't stay in here, Elena. The people in here, they're monsters. I looked at him quietly, taking a slow sip of my tea. You look tired, Ethan. Elena, I was wrong, he sobbed suddenly, pressing his forehead against the cold glass partition, tears streaming down his face, leaving dirty smudges on the window. I was an idiot. Chloe manipulated me. She seduced me. She targeted my insecurities. She made me feel like I was nothing. I never stopped loving you. Elena, we've been together for 10 years. 10 years, I repeated softly. And yet yesterday morning, when I checked our home safe, I found that you had taken my mother's heirloom emerald necklace and pawned it to pay for Chloe's European vacation last summer. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He froze, unable to meet my eyes. You told me you were a self-made man, Ethan. I continued, my voice smooth, calm, and utterly devoid of hatred. You told your friends at the gym that you carried me. You told Chloe that I was an old, washed-up woman who relied on your brilliant mind to survive. I pulled a single piece of paper from my coat pocket and pressed it flat against the glass. It was our final divorce decree and asset division settlement drafted by the city's top matrimonial litigation firm. Under our prenuptial agreement, I stated clearly, and in light of your criminal indictment for corporate embezzlement, you forfeit all rights to marital property, spousal support, and joint equity. The house is mine. The company is mine. The accounts are mine. Ethan stared at the document, his lips trembling violently. Elena, if I sign this, I'll have nothing. I won't even be able to hire a defense attorney. You can use the court-appointed public defender, I replied smoothly. I hear. They're very dedicated. Elena, please. Ethan dropped to his knees behind the glass, his handcuffs clinking loudly against his waist chain as he wept like a broken child. Don't do this to me. I gave you my youth. I spent my 20s building that startup. With you in that cold apartment. I looked down at the weeping man. There was no satisfaction in my heart. No bitter triumph. Just a vast, clean, weightless sense of peace. You didn't build that startup with me, Ethan, I said, looking straight into his bloodshot eyes. I built it. You were just the boy I allowed to hold the umbrella while I laid the foundation. I set the telephone receiver back onto its hook. I stood up, buttoned my navy coat, picked up my tea and walked out of the visitor room, leaving his muffled, frantic screams fading behind the heavy steel doors. 6 months later, spring arrived in the city, washing away the gray winter chill with warm sunshine and blooming white dogwood trees along the avenues. The headline on the cover of Forbes Financial Weekly featured a striking, high-definition portrait of a woman standing at the apex of a glass skyscraper. Elena Vance, the reclaimed empire. How Vance Global posted record Q2 profits. After historic corporate purge. Inside my corner office, the morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the dark hardwood floors. Amy walked in, setting a sleek tablet and a small wooden box on my desk. The criminal trial for Ethan Vance concluded 20 minutes ago, Amy reported. Smoothly, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of corporate embezzlement and tax fraud. Sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, no parole eligibility for 5. And Chloe Miller? I asked, scrolling through an acquisition file on my monitor. Sentenced to 18 months for accessory to grand larceny and receiving stolen property, Amy replied. Her legal team tried to file an appeal, but her public defender advised her to take the plea bargain. I nodded slowly, not raising my head. Good. Also, Amy added, gesturing to the wooden box on my desk. This arrived for you. At the front desk 10 minutes ago. No card. Just a local courier delivery. I paused, setting my pen down, and pulled the small wooden lid back. Inside lay a stunning, delicate bouquet of fresh, hand-picked wild lavender, white orchids and yellow freesias, no red roses in sight. Nestled between the stems was a simple, handwritten note from the lead design partner at our new European architecture firm. To a woman who knows exactly what she likes. Happy new beginning, Elena. I reached out, my fingers brushing the soft, fragrant petals of the orchids. A genuine, radiant smile bloomed across my face, a smile that reached all the way to my eyes. My phone chimed on the desk. A calendar notification popped up. Reminder, 10 a.m., annual shareholders keynote address. I stood up, adjusted my tailored cream silk blazer, and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the thriving, vibrant city below. The sun was high in the sky, bright, blinding, and completely mine.